Good afternoon. Welcome to Law Power Hour. Today it's my pleasure to have Janice Mitchell Ford on with me today. She's a senior litigator, and she'll tell you what that means at Clark Hill, a Detroit law firm and a national law firm. Janice, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you for having me.
I had the pleasure of meeting Janice when we were working on a program for expungement over at Bishop Vance Church earlier in the year. So not only does she work as a litigator, but she also works as a community activist and participant. And she's engaged in Wayne County. She's involved in what's going on. She's worked on some of the changes to the charter of the city of Detroit. In fact,
Yes.
she spearheaded the charter program, didn't you?
I did. I did with the help of wonderful citizens.
Well, that's why I wanted you on today. So why don't you talk a little bit about who you are and what you are?
Okay, so what I am is a Detroit native, born and bred, Detroit Public Schools graduate, King High School. Then I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Then from there, Northwestern University in Chicago. Came back home and I clerked for a federal judge for 2 years. Anna Diggs Taylor, the wonderful Anna Diggs Taylor.
You know, I just love Anna Diggs Taylor.
She's wonderful.
I remember having a case with her one time, and I parked my car in the parking lot
Oh,
across the street from the courthouse. And I went to get my briefcase out of the trunk, and the fellow who was parking my car backed up and hit me. So here's Judge Taylor. She takes off her robe. She said, "Mr. Keller, you're bleeding. Come into my chamber." She's giving me Band-Aids.
of course she did.
She's a regal woman. She's
Very
really
regal. Very
a special
regal.
woman, and her husband went to law school with me.
Oh, did he?
S. Martin Taylor went to law school with me.
Definitely, definitely. So those of us who have been federal clerks, everyone is judge this or judge that, but the judge that you clerk for is your judge. So I often say that Judge Taylor is my judge. So after doing that, I went to Foley and Lardner and practiced there for 11 years. Wow. And then I've been at Clark Hill for the past 4 years.
Well, you are a senior litigator there. That
Yes.
means you are a frontline trial lawyer.
Yes.
Today we ask you to come on because one of the areas that you get involved in is election laws. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I wanted you to assist our members. And please, if you're listening at home, feel free to call in if you have any question. We're going to answer your question, whether it's about electioneering, because I talked to a lady today, and she told me she was afraid to call and ask a question if the subject matter had nothing to do with the theme of the program.
Oh,
Do not have any fear. We're here to help you. That's what the program's about. Remember, Law Power Hour stands for the following: knowledge is power. And that's what it's all about. Now, here's a knowledgeable woman.
oh.
Please. She's a very knowledgeable woman. She knows all about the election laws, and she's going to walk us through the ballot. She's going to explain things on that part of the ballot that we never really get engaged in. Remember, we've talked about this for the last couple weeks, and I've tried to explain to you it's really important. Hopefully you agree with me
Sure.
that the most important part of the ballot
Is
for our
the-
listeners
is the
is the
nonpartisan, yeah.
nonpartisan part of the ballot, the propositions or the proposals,
Yes.
because they're the ones that affect us directly. The judges,
Yes.
those are the ones that affect us directly. The nonpartisan part of the ballot, those are the people that affect our daily lives.
Yes.
Now, where do you want to start on the ballot today?
Okay, so let's just talk about early voting or in-person absentee voting. How about that? So if you live in the city of Detroit, and even if you don't, I suggest that you call your clerk and find out where you can either get your absentee ballot or to vote in-person absentee. If you're in the city of Detroit, you can vote in-person absentee 5 different places. One is at the Boulevard in Woodward, the Election Commission, and that's from 9 to 5 up until the day before the election. And then there's 4 locations throughout the city, East Side and West Side, and I have them here: Wayne County Community College Northwest Campus, Wayne County Community College Eastern Campus, Patton Recreation Center, and Rosa Parks Transit Center. You can go to all 4 of those places between 9 and 4 from today up until the day before election. And absentee ballot, you have to be over 60 years old, or you won't be in the city that day. So if you live in Detroit and you're going to be in Highland Park all day, November 8th, then you'll be out of the city of Detroit, and so you can get an absentee ballot. So you can vote early if you like. But when we talk about the importance of the nonpartisan part of the ballot, those are the races that impact your daily life, like you said. All the issues that are kind of front and center right now in Detroit, pension issues, school election law issues, are all decided by judges. Now, we know a law is made in legislature or a law is made in city council, but whenever there's a fight about what the law means, it goes before a judge. And so you want to have a judge on the court who you believe is a good person, who is credible, who is studied and cerebral, people who think about these things, people who are steady, are not very reactionary, and people who are not necessarily beholden to one side or the other, but who are fair and just. So it's important that we put good judges on the bench because they're very hard to get off if they're bad.
Let me say it a simple way. We don't want influence peddlers controlling the courts. How's that?
Okay. I'll take that.
Is that true?
I think that's true.
We want even-handed treatment for everybody.
Yes.
The rich and the poor are in the same plane when they get in the courtroom. That's what we're talking about.
That's what it should be. That's why the Lady Justice has blindfold on. She's not looking at people and where they come from or what they have.
So if you're the tenant and you're being evicted because somebody locks you out, you got a right to go to court against the landlord who owns the building if he doesn't give you notice to quit, and you can get damages. We want that kind of judge instead of the landlord coming in and saying, "Hi, Judge, remember me? I went to your cocktail party." We don't want that. We want even-handed treatment, don't we?
That's what we want.
I'm being pretty graphic, but I'm truthful, aren't I?
I think you're pretty truthful. I wouldn't use another word.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning of the ballot, what you would call straight party voting. So it was some commotion about whether that was going to be on the ballot or not. So for 125 years in the state of Michigan, we have had straight party voting up until about 2015, where our wonderful legislature decided that they were going to undo straight party voting.
That was a governor? Governor Snyder did that, didn't he?
Well, it came from the Michigan legislature,
Right.
and he signed the bill, but it started off in the Michigan legislature, which is primarily balanced toward one party versus another.
It was the Republican whip who did it in this case. I remember. The same person who was working on getting the poll tabs through with his wife to have some form of gambling in the state.
Oh, okay. So, legislature passes law, the governor signed it into law, undoing straight party ticket voting that we have had for 125 years. And then lawyers filed a motion they filed a motion for an injunction. What that means is stop, halt, don't move any further. We're going to keep things the way they are until we can get a judge or a court to decide whether this should happen or not. So Judge Gershwin Drain, former Wayne County judge, then appointed to the Michigan federal court by President Obama, happened to draw the case. It's a blind draw, and he just happened to draw the case. Judge Gershwin Drain said, no, this has to be stopped. We're going to allow the injunction to stop that. Our Attorney General, Bill Schuette, wanted to appeal Judge Gershwin Drain's decision. He went to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Let's stop for a second. Remember this name. Bill Schuette wants to run for governor. So don't forget the name, because he believes that he can run the state better than anybody else. He's the Attorney General, and he wants to take reins eventually.
Okay, so that guy, Bill Schuette, he appealed Judge Gershwin Drain's decision to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. And the way courts work is Federal District Court, U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, Supreme Court. So he filed an emergency motion with the Sixth Circuit saying, undo Judge Drain's decision. We want to undo straight party voting. And he asked that the court issue a ruling by September 8th, 2016, to allow time for the ballots to be printed. Remember, all this is going on, and we need the ballots to be printed for the November election. So the U.S. Supreme Court, I mean, the Sixth Circuit agreed with Judge Drain, said, no, we're going to leave the injunction in place. And then Mr. Schuette, that guy that you mentioned, then applied for an emergency appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, which we now know is a 4-4 court, right? Because with the unceremonious and untimely passing of Justice Scalia, we now have a 4-4 court. And so because there was no majority decision to accept that case, it was split 4-4, so the court did not take it up. However, Judge Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito said that if they had the opportunity, they would have voted to do away with straight party voting. So
Well, that's because Clarence Thomas, thought that Scalia was talking from the grave.
well, here's the point, though. This is why it's important who you elect up and down the ballot, because the next president will appoint Supreme Court justices. And if we had had one more conservative-leaning person on the court at that time, straight party voting would be done with. So when you look at this thing all the way up and down, Judge Gershon Drain, appointed by Obama, you had the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals panel. Of the 15, let's say 9 are Republican leaning, and the other 6 are not. And we got a panel of 3 that were all Democratic leaning, and then you get to the Supreme Court. So had it not been for the judges at each step, we wouldn't even have straight party voting anymore, but we have it now.
Well, let's explain one thing to our listeners. Isn't it true that the people that decided this case, the judges who decided this case, were all appointed?
Yes, federal courts are appointed. Federal judges are appointed.
And that these particular judges never have to run for office?
Federal judges are appointed for life. For Article 3 judges are appointed for a lifetime.
And when they're appointed for a lifetime, they generally get there because they've served in lower courts and have had experience.
Most of the times.
Right, so when you see a judge appointed out of Wayne County to the federal bench, he or she has run on a nonpartisan ticket before.
Sure.
So that's why it's really important to pay attention who you're voting for, because eventually they can be elevated to a court where they never have to run for office, and they're making decisions that affect our lives every day. That's my point.
Okay, I think it's a good point. So now that we have straight party voting, if you look at your ballot, all the races that are marked partisan, if you select Democrat or if you select Republican or if you select Independent, whatever party you choose will cast a vote in all of those races. And those races include President, U.S. Congress, State Senator, State Legislator, State Board of Michigan, University of Michigan Board of Regents, Michigan State University trustees, Wayne State University governors, Wayne County prosecuting attorney, sheriff, clerk, register of deeds, and Wayne County commissioner. So if you do a straight party vote and you select Democrat, then all those races are already done.
Let's take a break for a minute. We'll be right back.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
We're back on the air.
Yes, we are.
Yes. Now, having said that, let's talk about the election.
Okay, so we already know that so if you are like me and you don't want to select the party, straight party voting, I like to actually blacken in each oval. That's just the nerd in me. So if you want to go through each race, then here are the races. The presidential race, of course, we know 4-year term with a limit of 2 terms, totaling 8 years, with a salary of about $400,000.
Let me ask you a question about that, because it came up at the breakfast table, and I really think it's an important question. Do you think we get underqualified candidates to be president of the United States because of the salary that they're paid?
No,
Tell me why you don't believe that.
because the intangibles that go along with the presidency, the power that comes along with that, and the amount of money that you can make once you're done. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. How much money have they made since they've been out of the presidency? So no, I don't think that's the issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
Now I'll let you move on.
Oh, okay, no problem. So we know we're going to cast our votes, and that's called the popular vote, right? But we have this system of elections in this country called the Electoral College. So it takes 270 electoral votes in addition to us casting our votes for that person. Michigan has 16 electoral votes, whereas Florida has 29. So when we hear about why Florida is always, such a big state that's in place, because they have so many electoral votes that can be casted. Michigan has not gone Republican since 1988. So, I'm not a prophet and I don't have a crystal ball, but you would think that Michigan would continue in that trajectory and go Democrat on November 8th. We have seen situations where a candidate has won the popular vote and not won the electoral vote. I mean, we've seen some of that with Bush and Gore and how that can go. So that's just a little bit of information about the president.
Now, do you think there's going to be an impact on who people vote for in this election in our state because of everything that's occurred within the state with the education problems and the water problems in Flint, and that it's going to have an effect upon how people vote?
In a normal election, probably so. It would probably go against Hillary Clinton if it were a normal election, but this is an abnormal election. And so people are allowing some things to slide, I think, just to not elect Donald Trump. I don't think that people are going to attach the Flint water crisis with Hillary. They're probably not going to attach it with Snyder either. I just think that this election is so strange that the local issues will not really impact what happens on a national level.
And that's another reason why it's so important to get out and vote. You shouldn't be frustrated. Isn't that true?
Oh, sure. I mean, when you take a look at Flint water crisis, it almost could not have occurred but for the emergency management law. But for that law, which gives complete oversight to one person who answers to no one, Flint would not have happened. DPS would not have happened. I mean, there's a direct line that can be drawn to that law.
We're going to stop there for a minute because I want everybody to understand that the emergency manager law was on the ballot.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
And when it was on the ballot, it was on the nonpartisan part of the ballot.
sure. That's where all the juicy stuff is, on the nonpartisan part.
Okay. Let's go over the juicy stuff on the ballot because it's really important. We've got Proposal A and Proposal B on this ballot, correct?
Well, before we even get to that, when you look at your ballot, it's going to say nonpartisan section, and it's going to say judicial. That's the first part of that nonpartisan ballot. And some would say it's the biggest fallacy going that the Supreme Court races are nonpartisan. Because when you look at the people running for Supreme Court, they're nominated by their party. So one would say, well, is it really nonpartisan? Probably not. So I would say research the people on the ballot for judges for Supreme Court to determine who nominated them, and that can help you figure out which party they're kind of aligned with. So that's the first thing.
I have to be respectful of all the candidates because I'm a member of the bench and bar,
Yes, you are, and so am I.
and we've had some of the individuals running on the show, and I think that they're good candidates.
Okay. Okay, well, that's fine. So then once you get past Supreme Court, and Michigan Supreme Court is kind of like the U.S. Supreme Court for the state, it's the highest court in the state. Then you get to Court of Appeals, which is kind of like the Federal Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's like the major appeals court for the state. And there's, at least in Detroit and Highland Park, there will be one race for that. 3 candidates running, 2 incumbents, and then 1 person who is not an incumbent. Then the next set of judicial races you get to is Third Circuit. So a Third Circuit court in the state of Michigan is Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Circuit Court, District Court. So for Detroit or for Wayne County or for Highland Park, it's Wayne County Circuit Court. And there's about 4 different races listed for those. And I would encourage you to get more information on each judicial candidate to go to vote411.org. Vote vote411.org. And if you go there, it's the League of Women Voters. And they do a really good job of kind of listing each candidate, all their information, their questionnaires. You can click on each person and find out more information. So I suggest that you do that for the judicial candidates, as well as there are two bar associations who have ranked these judges. Most bar associations stop doing it because it gets a little bit political and you don't want to rank people that you have to go before. But there are two bar associations who are still doing it, and I'm a member of both of them. It's the Detroit Metropolitan Bar Association, and it is the Wolverine Bar Association.
And you know, I only saw one person who was listed on there as unqualified, whose names will not be mentioned.
You can go to the ratings and find out who it is, and I think that person was listed unqualified on both.
That's correct.
Yeah. But if you go to the website for Wolverine Bar Association or Detroit Metropolitan Bar Association, you can find the rankings for those judges. So then also you have 36th District Court. I think it's important to discuss one of these races for 36th District Court. It's the race that says Judge of District Court, 36th District incumbent position, vote for not more than 8. And there are 9 people listed. You do not want to vote for Ruth Carter. Don't cast a vote for her. She has resigned from the bench. She is now working, I think, in some government position. But even if she is elected, she will not be seated, and that seat will be appointed by Governor Snyder. So it's important that you not vote for her because she wouldn't even be seated anyway. So vote for anybody else you want to, but the word is do not vote for her as she is no longer sitting on the bench.
Okay, we have a call coming in.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Law Power Hour.
Yes, I have a question for you. You just listed the where I can go on a website to find out about different candidates.
Yes.
What's that information again for me, please?
Vote411.org. Let's see if you see it. Vote411.org. And if you need to figure out where to go and vote, you can go to the top website, michigan.gov/vote. If you don't know where to vote, like where your polling station is, michigan.gov/vote. But this website, vote411.org, will give you information on each candidate. And then also today, Bridge Magazine came out with a really good database of all those candidates running for the Detroit School Board, where they've like kind of drudged everything from foreclosure notices to lawsuits. So you can find out about their substantive background, but also if they have any tax liens or bankruptcies and things like that.
It's important to investigate the people who are going to be representing us.
It's very difficult to get them out if they're bad. It's easier to keep them out.
Please go ahead, because this is really important today, what we're talking about. We're less than 3 weeks away from the election.
2 weeks. 2 weeks today.
Yep.
Okay, so then you can go through the other races that are on the ballot, and we can, so you can go through that. And again, for the judges, I recommend that you go to vote411.org, but also that you look up their ratings on Detroit Metropolitan Bar Association website and Wolverine Bar Association website. Then the next thing on the ballot are the Board of Trustees for the colleges. And you talk about tuition rates going up at Michigan and Michigan State. You talk about the number of African-American graduates from Wayne State, how it's shockingly low. The people who decide those issues or who can impact those issues are the Board of Trustees for each of those universities. And again, it's nonpartisan, but each of them were nominated by their party.
And those Board of Trustees have an important role when it comes to entrance, admission, development of programs with the high schools, so that it becomes easier for students to acculturate, and I'm using the word in terms of college acculturation, so that they get through college. Only 54% of the people who attend college make it through today.
Really?
There's a huge dropout rate during the first year, because young adults are not prepared to go to college. They have not gone through the basic training and social understanding of what's necessary and the commitment necessary to go to college. It's not a criticism, it's a fact. It's a horrible statistic that we have to live with.
And that very issue is one that like you said, is an issue for the Board of Regents or Board of Directors or Board of Trustees, and that's why it's important to elect good people to those positions. So for Wayne County Community College, U of M, Michigan State, these are all races that are on the ballot. And so again, they're nominated by their party though. So this is nonpartisan, but they're come out of a party. So I would just recommend that you look up each of those candidates as well. Another nonpartisan big race on this ballot is the State of Michigan Board of Education. So just like Detroit has a Board of Education, or Highland Park, or West Bloomfield Hills, the state of Michigan has an elected Board of Education. And again, they're nominated by their party, so they're nonpartisan. But when you talk about the school reform office, right, and school closures and going from MEEP to MSTEP and all these things that impact our schools, the board that decides that is the Michigan Board of Education.
Aren't they the same individuals who help decide how much money is spent on books in various parts of the state to educate students?
Yes.
So when they get less money coming into Detroit and more money going to Oakland County, you ought to take a close look at who you're voting for to see if they're interested in your children. Because this is a big issue about not providing equality in education in the state.
Michigan Department of Education. If you recall, Governor Snyder moved the school reform office outside of the purview of the Michigan Board of Education into the Office of Management and Budget. So when you talk about school closures, and that list is coming out from MDE, I think it's coming out end of November as far as lowest performing schools. And then in December is when you're going to see the closure list come out. And so they're not even really in control of the schools that close anymore. Right now, that's completely under the governor's purview.
How many schools are going to close in Detroit? What's your best guesstimate?
Well, I mean, I don't know who's going to close. Lowest performing, there are at least 35 on the list.
How many of those are charter schools?
Oh, no, I'm just speaking of DPS and EAA. I don't know how many of those are charter schools.
So the Detroit Public Schools and EAA schools, that's at what level?
K through 8. I mean, K through 12.
K through 12, we're going to lose over 35 schools.
No, I didn't say we're going to lose. I said they're lowest performing. So they could be subject to closure, but I don't know whether they're going to close or
Well,
not.
some of them are going to close. We don't know what percentage.
Again, I don't know whether they're going to close or not. I know that they would be subject to closure. The reason I say that is because of this. Under the current law, if you're on that list of lowest performing schools, lowest 5% for 3 years straight, then you are subject to closure. The issue with that, and this is why Miller Canfield issued that opinion to DPS, and DPS gave it to the governor, and he agreed, then the Attorney General said, no, I don't agree. The issue is 3 years on a list based on your performance, but Michigan just moved from the MEEP test to the MSTEP test. So 2 years of that 3 years is under MEEP, and 1 year is under MSTEP. So the argument is you really should start 3 years from MSTEP and not from MEEP, because we really can't determine whether it's still 3 years. So we're going to hear more about that, and the only way to resolve the issue of what the law is, the Attorney General says it's X, so now we need to figure out what the court said, and I'm sure a lawsuit is coming in that regard.
Okay, we're going to take a break for a minute. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the difference between MSTEP and MEEP. Okay, because some of us my age really don't understand the difference, but you'll explain it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
Can you help me out? Explain the difference between MEEP, and what was the other one?
MSTEP. So these are aptitude tests that schools take every year to determine whether they are progressing in accordance to accepted criteria. Usually it's third, seventh, and 10th, I think. I may have that a little wrong, but these are tests that are taken. And for years, Michigan had been under the MEEP test, Michigan Educational Aptitude Proficiency, something like that. And just last year, we moved to MSTEP, Michigan something, 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 something. So it's two different tests, two different metrics. And one would argue that you can't hold me to a three-year metric under a three-year term when you're using different metrics for different years of those terms. So I think that's going to be the issue that is before the court.
Well, let me ask you an important question. How can you hold the school to any standard if they don't have the books or the equipment necessary to help educate the students?
Well, that's a question. I mean, unless it's a valid question.
And don't you think that the state should pay more attention to that first?
I think that the state should provide schools with all that they need to properly educate children.
And I know you're involved in education law.
I am.
And I know you represent school boards, so I'm not going to put you on the spot.
Thank you for that.
Okay, but I have some pretty strong feelings about offering inferior education.
Oh, yes, and there's a lawsuit pending right now. I want to say it's not AFL-CIO, it's another group who has filed a lawsuit against the governor and any manner of people just about that very issue. So other nonpartisan races, I know we got to hasten on. For the city of Detroit, there's a city council race on the ballot, and you would say, why? No other city councilmen or women are being elected at this time. That's because when the city of Detroit revised its charter back in 2012, it decided that they did not want to have any more special elections. If you recall, back in 2009, we held 4 elections within like 6 months. So they decided we were going to no more special elections, but if there was a vacancy, there would be an appointment made, and then that person would hold that seat until the next citywide election. So Janae Ayers was appointed, 2 years ago? And so now the next citywide election from her appointment is this one coming up. So that particular race is on the ballot. You have Janae Ayers versus David Alexander Bullock. And then school board for the city of Detroit. We haven't had an elected school board in a long time. 7 people will be elected. You would say, why are there 63 people on the ballot? Why was there no primary? That's because the legislation which made the new Detroit Public Schools Community District was not completed until July 1st, and so we missed the deadline to have a primary. So I would encourage you to go to that website, vote411.org, and also Bridge Magazine, and look up each of these people and determine who you think would be good for the new school board. Now, the proposals.
Okay, now when you get to the school board,
Yeah.
what's really important is that you study the candidates to make sure that there be no graft and corruption involved. And I'm very serious about this. You don't want people sitting on the school board who have friends that are going to get contracts to supply food, books, transportation. You want people on there who are not related directly or indirectly with anyone, because we've had a real problem with graft and corruption in the city and bribing. So I want you to really pay attention to who you're voting for. You owe it to your kids. You owe it to your families. If we don't get these kids educated and get the right people out there on the school board to help educate them, we're just going to have a higher crime rate. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think Mayor Young, as one of his famous quotes, is the best way to combat crime is to give a man a job. And so in order for him to get a job, he has to be able to read and count money and things like that. So I agree with your logic. I would also, as a DPS grad, I would also say that this is the last go-round for DPS. There will be no more $651 million. This is it. So if we don't get this right, I don't think DPS will be around in another 20 years, and that's my honest belief. So we need good people who are good intentioned to get on this board.
Thank you. I really appreciate that comment.
Oh, sure.
Let's talk about the proposals now.
Okay, so regional transit. I lived in D.C. for 4 years and Chicago in 3 years. I didn't own a car until I was 25 years old when I moved back home. So for me, regional transit is a no-brainer. It's like, yes, let's do that. So that's my personal opinion, but regional transit is not M1 rail. People are thinking that that's what it is, like it's the go-kart, not go-kart, but the train that goes down from the Jefferson to the boulevard, and it is not that. The Q
the
line.
Q line, right.
Yeah, it's something very different. Regional Transit is a line that goes from Detroit to Ann Arbor, a line that goes to Detroit to Mount Clemens.
You know, when I moved here 53 years ago, they used to have the Bluebird Express.
Oh, hey.
And it used to go from Detroit to Pontiac and from Pontiac to Flint to Saginaw. And then when they did away with that, we replaced it with the thumb. So
Oh,
you have to get out and
hilarious.
hitchhike.
Oh my goodness. I wouldn't recommend that.
Not
Okay.
today, I wouldn't recommend.
So that's regional transit. And so again, go to vote41.org to get more information about that. And then the Wayne County RESA, their millage is coming up. And what is Wayne County RESA? Wayne County RESA is an organization where all the schools in Wayne County feed up into, and they do services that the schools can't afford to do. So for example, when it comes to IT services, a lot of them will bundle up and go through Wayne County because Wayne County RESA can provide those services where the schools can't necessarily provide them. So for me, again, as a person who loves education, I don't think it's really something that we can afford not to do. So that's Wayne County RESA.
You're enthused with this, but explain, please. It's really important for our listeners to understand this. There are a lot of schools that don't have IT.
Oh, yes. Many of them don't. They go through Wayne County RESA to get it.
Right, and this is a way for all the schools to have access to the internet.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Very
And-
important.
And that's why I'm breaking it down. Access to the internet. So if you're an adult and you go to adult education, you'll also have access to the internet through these schools.
Nice.
So it's important to vote on this issue
Very important.
because not everybody can afford to have internet access at home.
Yes.
Maybe someday we'll have free internet access in this country. Maybe our government will provide us with it. That's on our wish list. Spend more on IT and internet access and less on guns, and we'll be further ahead by educating people. That's
heard
just
it.
my opinion.
And you heard it here first. And then the last two items on the nonpartisan ballot for the city of Detroit are Proposal A and Proposal B. So we hear this all the time. Illich, Gilbert, they built these arenas, they built these places, and they get tax breaks, but there's no benefit to the community. They don't hire Detroiters, they don't train us to work these jobs.
Let me stop you there for a minute. You mean
Okay.
all these people who were living in the Cass Corridor, who were moved out of the Cass Corridor and had to learn how to swim because they're being moved out to areas where there's water around them, like they're being moved. I got a lot of my clients being moved down the river, you know, and they're being moved out of areas where they lived for years. They're being thrown out of their apartment buildings because they're becoming these quote unquote Tony areas, high-end areas to live today. And these folks who lived there for 25, 30, 40 years, supported the city, had jobs in the city, are being forced out because developers have received tax breaks as much as $600 million to build arenas in the city.
So some people are upset that they get tax breaks, but there's no seeming benefit to the community. And City Council has been dealing with this issue. I don't know why they have not been able to get it done, but under the city charter, the City Council has about 3 jobs: to pass contracts, to pass ordinances, and to pass the budget. So what we find on our ballot are ordinances that they're asking us to pass instead of it passing at the table. So Proposal A, community benefit, was put together as a ballot initiative by some community members. And this is proposing that developers who have projects costing $15 million or more and who get public subsidies or tax breaks, that they have to go through these issues as far as providing jobs and things like that.
Okay, that's the most important part of it, is providing jobs for people in the city so that they can support themselves. And I'm talking about real jobs.
Right. So some feel that that 15 million trigger is too low. And then you have a Proposal B, which was put on the ballot by city council members. I have seen Scott Benson advocating for this one. It has the same type of analysis to provide jobs, but it only picks up at 75 million, so it's a much higher threshold. So interestingly, Mayor Duggan, the regional chamber, some unions are anti-A, but I understand that council president is for this. But then others, carpenters and millwrights unions, are for B. I think that both of them kind of fall short, and that it's a bit of a rushed process. As I understand it from Councilman Benson, Proposal B was put on the ballot because Proposal A was going to be on the ballot. I think that the city council, this is my own personal opinion, can go to the table and really work this out and give us the best proposal versus either of
I want to
these.
share a thought with you about the carpenters and the millwrights, why they're in favor of it. You know, every time we have a convention in town, who's working? The carpenters and the millwrights. Because they're doing the build out and they're doing the tear down. So they're the people who are always getting jobs. And I'm not criticizing either union,
Right.
but they're feathering their own nest with these arenas and all these other beautiful facilities that are being built.
Well, go to vote411.org, get more information about both of those, and see where you land. I think there's pros and cons for both. But the legislative process is kind of like sausage. You know, I need somebody to sit down at the table, to study the issues, to go back and forth with it, and take the time to figure out what's best. I, as a voter, am going to do that personally, but most voters will not. And I just think it's best for those people who are tasked with creating ordinances for them to do their jobs and for them to do that, and not ask us as citizens to do that on their behalf.
Okay, so the best advice you can give to every citizen listening to this show is to get out and vote, correct?
Get out and vote, whether it's absentee in person, or on November 8th.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having
We're
me.
going to take a break for a minute.
Thank you.
Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
Well, we have a real interesting person here, Mr. Richard Bowers, hopefully soon to become Judge Richard Bowers, running for the 36th District Court. Hold on, we've got a call coming in here for a second. Good afternoon, welcome to Law Power Hour. Hello,
Hello.
we have a question coming in.
Yes. I believe Richard Bowers is running for judge in Detroit.
That's correct, yes.
I'm wondering sort of you've received from the community in the Detroit area.
Well, would you repeat that question? I'm sorry, we didn't catch all of it.
What endorsements have you received in the Detroit area?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Bowers. I've received several endorsements. I can briefly explain them.
Well, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. We just got started here.
Go ahead.
The Detroit Free Press endorsed me, 14th Congressional District, the Black Methodist Alliance Slate, East Side Slate, Detroit Police Lieutenants and Sergeants Association, UAW Region 1 and 1A, Chief Judge Pro Tem Prentice Edwards of the 36th District Court, and Court of Appeals Judge Cynthia Stevens, and many others as well.
And he's also, from both bar associations, classified as highly qualified because he's made a real investment in Detroit and Wayne County. He's the kind of person who is engaged in the community, whether it's as a lawyer, as an activist, or for social commitments and responsibility.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, the Wolverine Bar Association and Detroit Metropolitan Bar Association, I believe I was the only candidate in my race that was deemed qualified by both of them. So thank you.
What is
Go ahead,
Excuse me,
sir.
what is the Wolverine Bar Association? What bar association is that?
It's a local Detroit bar association that was started by African Americans. They have a website, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your questions.
Take care.
Now, the reason I said he's engaged in what goes on in the city, I did a little reading in your background, and I understand that you were helping indigent, out-of-work individuals when you were going to undergraduate school in Louisiana to make sure that they had clothes to wear so they could go out and get jobs.
That's right. I started it when I was in college at Tulane, and it was called Tennessee Clothing, based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was a nonprofit organized to give primarily welfare recipients professional clothes for job interviews once they graduated through a job training program that existed at the time.
Do you know how important that is, that when you want to get a job, that you can put your best foot forward, you can be dressed, and this is a man who cares about people getting jobs and getting employment. How did you get involved in that?
Well, there was a program in the city of Chattanooga where I grew up that had a job training program. I believe it was administered through the state of Tennessee at the time, where they could sign up for a program for job training depending upon what their skills were, and if they graduated, then I partnered with Goodwill Industries, who accepted the clothing, and local dry cleaners that cleaned them, and it was distributed through the Department of Human Services.
So what you're really looking at is a man, if he gets elected to the bench as a justice sitting in the 36th District Court, who will have indigent people coming in front of him, and he understands what their problems are. That's why I'm really excited about you running for office.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was 20 years ago, too, so
But you're still doing it today.
yes, I am.
Yeah, you're still engaged in that program, and you've been involved in a lot of programs in Detroit, haven't you?
I have indeed.
What kind of programs can you tell our listening audience that you've been involved in that have to do with indigency?
Well, I've been a long-time volunteer for Matrix Human Services. Many people may know what that is. They have many locations, over 20 at least, across the city, where their main goal is to eliminate poverty. And I've been parts of all kinds of events with them over the years. And I've always been on the board of my neighborhood association wherever I've lived, and a lot of cultural, nonprofit type events as well.
Now, these Matrix programs do two things. They help feed and clothe individuals, and they also help individuals find jobs. Isn't that true?
That's true.
So you're hands-on.
That's right.
And we talk about this all the time on the air, that we want people sitting on the bench who are hands-on, who understand human beings. Tell us about your practice so we understand if you understand human beings. What do you do?
Well, currently I'm a hearing officer for Building Safety Engineering Environmental Department, which I have been for the past 4 years. And I oversee show cause hearings for zoning and business license issues. And in the city of Detroit, there are 64 different types of businesses that can obtain a license. And when the city or the police department finds a business that's in trouble for one reason or another, it might be they haven't had safety inspections or haven't paid fees, or there's alleged criminal activity, then it comes to me to a hearing to work out what needs to be worked out.
Okay, I'm going to hold this hand up for a second because this is really important. He's going to think I'm crazy. But you see this hand up here? This is the hand of a man who prevents slumlords from renting to you. This is the hand of a man who prevents slumlords from having you live in a house without heat or water. Is that true?
That's true.
That's my point. This is the kind of person that you want on the bench, because he understands those problems. And I just went through this where a lady called me. She was a renter, and she didn't have any water. And she was forced out of her apartment because the landlord shut the water off. So she asked me in one of the clinics that we run, what can I do about this? I said, well, That's called constructive eviction. You were forced out. You were kicked out. And there are remedies for that, aren't there?
There are remedies.
And this is what's important, that you understand that you have people who are hands-on, who are dealing with these problems. I just had another situation where a landlord locked a tenant out. Now, I really want you to understand this because it's important. Here's a guy who was in Vietnam. And then he went to Desert Storm, because when you picture this, he served his whole life in the service. Came out, he's living in an apartment. And then there was a dispute because he had children, his grandchildren, staying with him, and he was the only tenant. So the landlord locked him out. Can you imagine that? He came back to get his clothes, and his clothes were gone. And they took his TV. So he came to me and said, what can I do about it? I said, you're entitled to 3 times the damages because they evicted you and they didn't have a right to do that without going to court. You understand those laws, don't you?
Yes, I do understand those laws.
And you're the kind of person that we want there because you understand these laws to protect the community.
That's right. In 2007, I might mention this if I may, when I was a staff attorney for Ken Cockrell Jr., I drafted the anti-profiling ordinance for the city of Detroit.
Why don't you explain to our audience what anti-profiling is about? I almost choked on my words because it's really exciting that you were in charge of this.
Well, it was a long time ago now, and it was drafted for a lot of needed reasons. Not only African Americans being profiled, but Arabics with maybe wearing turbans, or Latino people in Southwest Detroit being assumed to be illegal aliens just by the way that they looked. And I think it could be because we've had that ordinance in the city of Detroit for almost 10 years, that's why the city of Detroit doesn't have a lot of issues with police profiling individuals in Detroit the way other cities have, because it's been part of the police training program for almost 10 years now.
So racial profiling is down in Detroit, but it's still climbing in the suburbs, isn't it?
But it's profiling based on appearance.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You know, we did a program on DWB, and we noticed that when you go up Telegraph Road, you get in Oakland County, on Saturday night, if you're African American, you're going to get stopped. Doesn't matter if you're a judge or a junkie, you're going to get stopped. But if you're white, you can weave down the lane. As long as you stay in the lane, you're going to get home without getting the ticket. That's what we're talking about with racial profiling, aren't we?
Yes,
So what you're talking about is even-handed treatment for everybody.
that's right.
So whether you're rich or poor, when you come in the courtroom, you're going to get the same treatment.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm concerned about, and that's the kind of person I want on the bench. And you actually worked with Ken Cockrell Jr. on this.
Yes, I did.
And what other service did you provide to the city with other judges and other members of the
Well, I worked for, during my career at the city, I worked for 3 different council members: Ken Cockrell Jr., Brenda Jones, who's now the council president, James Tate, who's council member of District 1, and under 4 different mayors. And all of those council members, as you may know, are very different, and all the mayors are very different. So I had a variety of different positions there. Policy mostly while I was at city council. I was a director of the Office of Energy and Sustainability in 2009, which was the green office for the city, when it had one, and I hear there's one coming back soon. But I reviewed every lawsuit that the city entered a settlement with or was presented with a settlement offer.
Let's stop for a minute here. If you understand what he's talking about the soot, the dust, the coal, and all the garbage in the city of Detroit, all the way down to the border of the city of Detroit on Schaefer and Fort. It's all southwest Detroit, and those green laws. And they've been a shambles for the last 5 or 6 years, haven't they?
Yes, they have been.
And there's been a proliferation. In other words, there's been a lot of flowering of litigation down there because people have been getting sick. Is that true?
That's right.
The only difference is they're building the Gordie Howe Bridge, and a lot of people are leaving that area. Is that true?
That's right.
But other than that, it's the same old problem with the smokestacks and all the trash down there and the junk that's left down there. And you participated in the green laws to prevent that.
Yes, I have.
So if you're sitting down in the 36th District Court as a judge, you're going to have to deal with these problems all over again, aren't you?
That's right.
And you're the one who's going to cite the landowners and the businesses down there.
That's right.
When I say cite them, you're going to hear their cases, and if you find them guilty, you're able to find them.
That's correct.
So we want you on the bench.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now tell us a little bit about your personal background, because I'm a nosy Parker sitting over here.
All right. Well, I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, went to Tulane University in New Orleans, and when I came to law school in Michigan, Thomas M. Cooley Law School in Lansing, graduated from there, came here many years ago, and then I moved to the city of Detroit, and I've been here ever since, over 14 years, and over 10 of that I've worked for the city of Detroit in one capacity or another. And the race that I'm in is the non-incumbent. There are 4 of us running for 2 open spots because 2 judges have retired, and so I'm running for one of those 2 spots.
You understand when he said non-incumbent what it means? It's that it's for newbies, first time around, that are not incumbent. That means they've never been on the bench before. I want to thank you for coming,
Thank you.
and I wish you the best of luck. And I'm not a resident of the city of Detroit, but I hope a lot of people cast their votes for you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Come back next week. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with elections. And when I said a little bit more, because there's a lot more that we've got to talk about with the election 2 weeks away.